Hello and welcome to Piwik PRO YouTube video series. Topic of the video: how to set up a goal in Piwik PRO Tag Manager. So what you're gonna learn? I'll start with some information that is good to know before you begin your setup. So explaining the difference between manual and automatic setup of goals. There are many similarities, but there are some minor differences that perhaps you should know. If you haven't seen the video where I explain basics of goals and automatic setup via analytics rather than Tag Manager, I would strongly encourage you to check it out too. I'll drop the link in the description below. Now, I will also explain the difference between goals and custom events, and let's say advantages of using one over the other. This should help you decide which one you should use. Then I will explain a step-by-step process for setting up a goal manually using Piwik PRO Tag Manager. This will include some debugging using debugger and tracker debugger. So let's explain the difference between manual and automatic setup of goals. In terms of setup, the process starts the same in the analytics under goals. In order to add a goal, I need to click on a Add a Goal button. But bear in mind, you need to have manage or higher permissions for the given property to be able to add or even edit a goal. So let's click on Add a Goal button, and then the very first step here would be to provide the goal's name. That name will be then seen throughout the analytics whenever you will be analyzing that very goal. So it is good to have some sort of naming convention for all your different goals to then be able to properly recognize them and keep them well organized. Then the next step would be to choose track goal automatically or track goal manually. If you choose track goal automatically, the condition for your goal will be decided in this gray box, so event type and conditions. I've explained it in more details in another video that I mentioned earlier, and link will be in a description. However, today's focus is track goal manually. You would still need to provide the name of a goal and then click on Save button, but the rest of the setup will be done in a Tag Manager. We'll get back to the setup later, so don't worry. However, the fact of choosing manual or automatic goal tracking may in some cases affect how your goals are being tracked. So stay with me. Now let's move on to Tag Manager. In Tag Manager, we have tags, and each and every tag on that list has this option called consent type. Again, we'll get back to the setup explanation in just a moment. And if your website uses consent form to say comply with privacy regulation, it would mean that visitors need to give you the consent for you to be able to track them. So in this case, we're looking at the Go Conversion tag, and this tag has a consent type analytics. If the visitor gives you the consent for analytics data use, then that tag will fire whenever the conditions are met. As for automatic goal tracking set up via analytics, in here, those conversion would be tracked whenever the basic tracking code would fire, because automatic goals are being served by the basic tracking code. So for all of those goals, what we need is to have a consent for basic tracking code. Basic tracking code is also a tag, and it also requires the consent. In most cases, that will be analytics type, just like with Go Conversion tag. However, Piwik PRO lets you activate the option of tracking visitors anonymously. And in this case, basic tracking code, which is the one that we're currently looking at, will be activated regardless of the consent. So anonymous tracking will trigger basic tracking code regardless of the consent. What it means is that goals set up via analytics, automatic goals, will be tracked when no consent is given, whereas those set up via Tag Manager would not, unless we would go to the Go Conversion tag and we would change it to no consent is required. So it is important to sync the consents for basic tracking code and the Go Conversion tags if you want to track them every time when the conversion happens in the anonymous mode, or if you want them to be fired only when the consent is being given. Make sure to set up properly your privacy settings and make sure that the consent types are being given properly to each and every tag. By default, Go conversion tags they all have analytics consent type. The next thing we should mention, and brings often some confusion, is what we should use for tracking an interaction or interactions. Custom event tag template or Go conversion template. Because technically speaking, the triggers, i.e. conditions for custom event and for Go conversion might be one and the same trigger, but there is a difference between custom event and a Go conversion. And from the objectives point of view, objectives for the business that are met through the website or simply objectives for the website, goals would be used for interactions that are important and serve the main or one of the primary purposes of the website. Whereas custom events would be used whenever we want to track certain interactions because they might be giving us some important insights, but are not necessarily as important as Go conversions. To give you an example, we might be tracking all button clicks on a website via custom event tag template. However, not every click on a button is as important to be tracked as a Go conversion. To give you an even more concrete example, you might be tracking all different buttons, but Buy Now button is probably more important and will be tracked via Go conversion tag template, whereas let's say See Next Page button would be less important but still insightful, and we would use custom event to track these. But that's not everything. Whenever we set up goals, they are then conveniently available in the UI of the analytics. So if I were to go to most of the reports in the UI, we'll have this drop-down menu where we can select specific goal instead of using filters to see data for the chosen goal. In custom reports, and I'm using an example of the Explore report, but that is true for all different custom reports that we use, we have this possibility to use filter goal name. And in this case, rather than typing in the values, I can use this convenient drop-down menu and select specific goal for our analysis. We can also use metric Go conversion and then click on it and then narrow it down to a specific goal, whatever seems more convenient to us. Moreover, we have this out-of-the-box Go conversion rate metric that, again, we can specify to a particular goal. Also, goals have this filter called session goals, which lets us figure out how many sessions there were in any given time period where visitors completed 2 or more specific goals in a session. So I could potentially use this filter in the filter area and add, let's say, consumer loan and car loan. And now data for this report under sessions would show us only the sessions, data for sessions in which this and this goal was converted. Alternatively, I could use it like that, and either of those goals would be converted. Something like that would be a bit more difficult with custom events, and that is due to filter scopes. Both Go and custom events are of event scope, but this filter is using session scope. In case of custom events, you would sometimes need to use custom event category, action, and name filters to narrow down to a specific interaction. And in some cases, you would need to use some additional filters too. So for example, if the click button submit and there's a, let's say, some sort of button click and the button's name is submit, and this button exists on 2 different URLs, to narrow down to a specific URL, you would probably need additional filter like page URL filter. Now, you might be wondering, why should I use custom events then if I can use goals every time whenever there is some sort of interaction, right? Well, not necessarily. First of all, from the perspective of implementing goals versus custom events, in many cases, we could add one or just a few custom events and provide triggers to fire for all, say, button clicks, and then use filters to see data for a specific click. In case of goals, we would often need to set up each goal conversion individually for each individual button. If you want the data granularity, obviously, you can't filter goals to specific click if you trigger a goal for all button clicks. Another thing is that with custom events, it is far more convenient to see in a one report the breakdown of parameters of the custom event, like category, action, and name. That depends obviously on the use case. But in our example, when we look at page scrolls, we have a page URL dimension, which shows URLs, and then scroll depth, in our case, will be shown by using parameter custom event action or dimension custom event action. So when we click on any of these URLs, but let's click on this one, we see the breakdown, i.e. scroll depth in our case for custom event action, and we see it all on a one report. So we can actually see the percentages, but also the values of people who scroll down on this particular URL. Now, to sum up, we would use goal conversions for the most important interactions that take place on our website. And then from the purely technical or practical point of view, goals would be better to use to track specific interactions, whereas custom events have more general purpose. Now, let's go through the step-by-step process for adding conversions via Tag Manager, so-called manual goal setup. Tag Manager provides a lot of flexibility thanks to Tag Manager triggers and variety of different ways in which we can use triggers to set up conditions for a goal when compared to automatic goal setup. But the process for both automatic and manual goal setup starts in the analytics. Now, let's add a goal, which will be our very first step in a goal setup. So I'm going to click on Add a Goal button. And then here we need to click on Track Goal manually, so we can then use triggers as our conditions. And in here, I need to provide the name. But for the name to make sense, let's have a look at the website. So here I have this website, demo website. And let's say I want to track clicks on this very button, Get Your Estimate Here button. So I'm going to name it Get Your Button Click, and let's save it. And now we've declared a goal in the analytics. What we're going to need from here is the goal ID. So I'm going to copy the ID and then I'm going to use it in a tag manager. To properly set up goal in the tag manager, we need a tag and a trigger. But let's start with the tag. So I'm going to click on Add a Tag. And then here I need to choose goal conversion template. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to hit Next. And here I need to provide the tag name. Tag name only exists within Tag Manager. You're not going to see it later in the analytics. However, I'm just going to be lazy and I'm going to copy the Get Your Estimate Here button click name in here. And I'm going to add conv as if that was a conversion, so we can easily recognize different tag types. So that's one way of keep informed when we look at the list of different tags, especially when the list is long. In here, I'm going to copy and paste back again the goal ID. Make sure to properly copy it, not to add any additional spaces or numbers. So that's copy and paste it. In here, there's a revenue. It's optional. I can add a fixed value, let's say $50, let's say dollars or whatever the currency we've had set up. Or we could use some custom variable if we had one, which is a number, which would capture some sort of number value. But I'm going to keep it as it is. In here, I could potentially add a custom dimension, providing that I already have one set up in the analytics. I could choose from the list and then provide the variable that would capture some sort of value for that custom dimension. But I'm going to keep it as it is. I'm going to keep the consent type to analytics. I'm going to keep respect, opt-out, and DNT as it is, and all other settings as they are. So now we need to add a trigger. I could add existing trigger if I had that one. So if I were to click on that, I have a list. I'm going to leave it as it is, and I'm going to add my new trigger. In here, we have all different trigger types. there's going to be another video where I'm going to explain all different trigger types. And once it's ready, I'm going to drop the link below this video. But in my case, in our case for today, we're going to use click trigger. And the reason for that is because we have a button that we want to track whenever somebody clicks on that button. So that's why click trigger. So I'm going to hit next. And then here I need to provide the name. So I'm going to add the name. Again, I'm going to be a bit lazy and I'm going to copy the same name in here. And here we have this very trigger condition. So fire a tag on all clicks. I don't want to do that. I want to fire a tag on a specific click. So that's why I'm going to choose this one when all these conditions are met. What it means, I can provide multiple conditions and then I can select those conditions. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just need one condition for today. And in here, I can use all different types of variables, the custom variables, i.e. the ones that I've added, or some built-in variables. And in my case, that's in our example, that's going to be one of those click ID, click URL, click class, or click element. So let's see what we need to use here. And to do that, we need to go back to the website and click on Get Your Estimate Here button using right-click mouse button and then clicking on the Inspect to enter DevTools. That's how you do it in a Chrome browser. Some other browsers might, this process might look slightly different. In here, I've selected the button and I can see I don't have an ID, but I do have a class. So I'm going to copy the entire class. To be more specific, 3 classes, BTN, BTN primary, and Jumbotron BTN. Those are 3 classes that were used for this particular button. So I'm going to copy them and I'm going to add them here. However, first I need to change it to class. But before we do that, I just want to mention that in the ideal scenario for this click to be fired only on that one specific click, we would want to use click ID. But when we don't have an ID of the element, we need to play with other options like adding multiple conditions or using class and be more specific using equals. Equal would work if there are no other buttons with the same classes. So I'm going to paste those classes. So this option would work if there are no other buttons with the same classes. Otherwise, our goal would be track when this and other buttons with these classes would be clicked as well. But let's presume, for the sake of simplicity, that this button is the only button on our website with this set of classes, just to keep things simple. So I'm going to hit add button to add the trigger. Now we can see that our trigger was added to our tag, so that should be fine. But I want to add one more comment about triggers, that I could potentially add another trigger. So let's just pick random trigger. And in here, notice that when I've added this trigger, I have this OR condition. So when the condition for this click or this click are met, that tag would fire. And this opens up the possibilities of tracking conversion for 2 different buttons. So if we have Get Your Estimate Here button and perhaps some other button elsewhere with slightly different class or perhaps an ID, I could add those 2 different conditions, and both conditions, when met, each individual condition is met because we have OR condition, we would then fire that tag, i.e. track the conversion. But let's remove it. And now another thing is that this tag was added, trigger was added, but it wasn't published yet. What does it mean? It means that it is not live on the website, meaning it will not send any data to our database. So we're not going to be able to see those conversions in the analytics. And that is for a good reason, because first we need to debug it. So let's debug our tag. So to debug the tag, first we're going to use debug mode that is available in here. So I'm going to click on debug mode. What it's going to do, it's going to open the website in a debug mode. So debug mode is this sidebar that opens to the right. And what we need to do is to first scroll down to our button. But before we're going to click, we need to find our tag here. Just to first explain the debug mode here, In here we have tag name, so those that are already blue has been fired. They had been fired. Those are still gray, had not been fired yet. We can see how many times they've been fired. I can click on any of those tags and see what was the actual script that was fired and what were the triggers. So let's find our tag. And I'm going to explain other things later. Here's my tag, and we can see it's not been fired yet. So let's click on our button and see if the tag fires. Yep, it got fired. And now I can click on that and see what was added to the website. So we can see the script, we can see the track goal, and we push the ID of our goal. We can see the trigger, we can see the conditions of that trigger. So we have click trigger of which click class equals BTN primary Jumbotron BTN. So all seems fine. Another way of checking whether our tag got fired properly is by going to Tracker Debugger. I'm in a Tracker Debugger. Tracker Debugger is another place where you can debug your tag. You can find Tracker Debugger by going to Analytics, then Settings, and then scroll down to Tracker Debugger. And then you would need to find your own session, because in here we have a log of sessions from the last 30 minutes, 1 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours. This might be sometimes difficult when you have a lot of traffic currently on your website. You may struggle to find your own session to be logged in a Tracker Debugger. So what you can do, you can go to your website and add this sort of parameter. This could be test, or this could be XYZ, whatever unique value that you are sure that there's no other such page view currently happening on your website. So test works for me. And then you can go, and in here you have page URL filter and find test and hit enter, and that would select your own session. Now in here I have oldest to newest, so it shows me the very first event that I started, but I want to reverse that from newest to oldest. And in here, if I were to scroll down, I can see that my test page view is happening, that it took place. I can click on show oldest events, and I can see that the conversion took place when we were debugging it in a debugger. So I can see that the conversion ID matches, the name of the goal matches, and also that it was tested in a debug mode. So Tracker Debugger is another place where you can check whether your conversion happens as it should. Now, before we wrap up with this video, there's one last step that we need to do, and that is this tag is working in a Tracker Debugger. It works in a debug mode, but it would not send any data to our database, and as a result we would not be able to see any conversions coming through in analytics because it is unpublished. This means that the tag is unpublished. I could also click away somewhere here, and in here we can see that the green dot is empty inside, it's gray. It means that the tag is active, that's why the circle is green, but it's unpublished, and that means that it's gray inside. So we need to publish that tag, and probably a good practice would be to go to changelog and check the unpublished changes and see whether there are other tags that might be published with this tag and whether they are ready to be published. You can always also consult perhaps your colleagues whether they've been adding any tags, but you can always check it in a changelog. Once you publish a tag, so once you hit the publish button, changes have been made. So this button will fire in debug mode, but also when real people will be clicking on this particular button on our website. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to our channel. Check the description below to find some useful links like free Piwik PRO signup page, community forum page, and links to related videos. Until next time.